So thank you everyone for joining our session. I'm Wesley Holden. I'm the community manager here at Totoro Learning, and today we are talking about learning plans. A couple of quick goals for this session. We're going to talk through terminology around the functionality. We're going to talk about the functionality itself, and that's where I'm going to jump in and show you live from the software how things work. And we're going to talk about the system from a couple, oops, sorry, my mic came unattached. There we go. And we're also going to talk about the system from a couple of different user perspectives so you have an idea of who can do what in regards to learning plans. Here's our quick list of terminology. Now, your mileage may vary on this. This is the terminology that's used within Totoro, within the software. You may have different terms that you use in your business, or your subscribers might have different terminology that they use depending on their industry. So keep in mind that this is just what it's called out of the box. The first, what is a learning plan? Well, a learning plan is a method of assigning learning to a user that allows you to have more hands-on control of that learning. And what I mean by that is that there are many ways to assign learning through Totoro. You can do things like assign it through a program, which is a series of courses. You can assign it through via an audience, which would be saying that this whole group of users needs to have this series of courses or this program. A learning plan is a little bit more hands-on. It allows us to assign, and you'll see the list below, competencies, objectives, courses, and programs. So 4 different types of learning to our users, and it's on an individual basis. So I'm going to show you the example from a manager adding learning for their learner, for one of their staff that reports to them here in a few minutes. So that is a learning plan overall. A template is sort of the basis of a learning plan within the system. A template is going to allow administrators to define what a learning plan can do, who's allowed to do things in the plan, who can add things to it, who can remove things, who can mark things as complete. So the template is all about setting up a structure for the plans that will be on the system. Competencies are one of the learning objects you can assign through a learning plan. So a competency is a skill or a proficiency that someone needs to have in order to do their job well. Objectives are kind of similar. Competencies are set up within the system. You set up categories of them, and then you can have lists of competencies, and you can assign them to people's positions or organizations. An objective, on the other hand, is more on a, I don't want to say a one-off basis, because a lot of people use them much more deeply than that, but objectives are more personal. I might assign an objective to one of my learners that may be slightly outside of the normal scope of their position. So for example, if I have a tech support person who technically is very, very smart, very good at the product, but maybe needs to work on like their interpersonal skills. Maybe when they send emails, they're being a little bit blunt and people are reading it kind of negatively. What I might do is set up an objective for that person of working on those interpersonal skills. And the way we might meet that objective might be, the manager kind of taking a look at some emails before they go out to give the person some feedback around what they're saying and how they could say it in a way that's more helpful for the client. So objectives aren't something that's system-wide. They're on a user-by-user basis. Courses, well, those are all over Totoro. Courses are where you go and create a course page, and then you add resources and activities for the person to complete. And programs are a sequence of courses. So it can be your entire onboarding program of 4 or 5 courses that a person needs to take. So those are the 4 things that you can assign through a learning plan to a user. Then we're going to get into the process. So we're actually going to start at sort of at the bottom of this list with our learner. We're going to walk through just taking a look at a learning plan in the system so you get an idea of what it is. We're going to add items to it. We're going to see how you mark completion. We're going to talk about notifications and requests that are coming out with it, and then how to complete a learning plan. From an administrator's perspective, we're going to take a look at how to create those learning plan templates, remember setting up that structure, and potentially how we can assign a template to a whole audience of users so we can do a bulk assignment of a learning plan. So I'm going to go ahead and pop out of my PowerPoint now and go into the software. So again, we're going to start from that learner perspective. So let me get my Firefox window up. So all I've done so far, this is just a sort of sandbox Totoro Learn 12 site. Keep in mind that for learning plans particularly, there haven't been a lot of changes to them in the last couple of releases. So The things that I show you through 12 will still apply even if you're on an earlier release as well. So my learner comes in, they can see all of these things that are assigned to them, their current learning, like the courses that they're enrolled in, alerts and notifications, and some other blocks as needed. On the left-hand side, we have the My Learning block and the learning plans that are available to this user. So I'm going to click on Learning Plans. And notice we say plans there plural because one user may have multiple learning plans. And here's why. I might have a plan each year. So every year I'm assigned a new learning plan. We set up the learning that I need to complete for that year. At the end of the year, maybe we mark it complete. Or at the end of completing all the courses and competencies in it, we might mark it complete. It's up to you and how your workflow fits into the business. In this case, here we have two active learning plans for this user. One that is in progress, that has one course, 6 competencies, and one objective that the person is working on. And they are about 25% complete with this plan overall. There's a second plan that was assigned that just includes courses and competencies. So you get to decide what types of learning are going to be assignable through a learning plan. So in this case, just courses and competencies. This person has already, at this point, we can look at it and see that there were 2 competencies. This is 100% complete, so they must have completed their competencies in that plan. Let's look at the plan that's in progress. So the user here is Abby, so we're going to log in as Abby, or excuse me, we're going to go in as Abby and take a look at this learning plan. So the first page is just sort of an overview, the name, when it was started, when they need to complete it by. We can also take a look at things like the courses that were assigned through it. So in this case, we have one course that was assigned, and Abby's actually going to be able to launch that course through the learning plan if I click. So not only does the learning plan allow you to create a structure and have those assignment methods of courses and competencies and things, but it gives the learner the way that they actually access it. Now in this case, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit later on, when you're assigning courses through a learning plan, you also have to make sure that the learner has access to those courses. So we'll talk about that in a minute. We can see though for that course, there's a launch course button. There's progress. So in this case, this course doesn't have any progress, and so there's no criteria set just yet. We also have evidence. So evidence is where we might link external work to the things that are in our learning plan. So for example, if this were a CPR course and I'm already CPR certified through a class that I've already taken, I may come into my record of learning, add evidence, and I can link it to the items in my learning plan as proof of to say, hey, I think I've already completed coursework that's equivalent to this. Can you take a look and let me know? And then we can also have comments. So you can actually give feedback and have conversation on these items. And so this would go between the learner and their manager. And actually, let me define the manager piece real quick, just for folks that maybe are a little bit newer to Totara. Within the system, you can set up, let me get my Zoom window out of the way, there we go. When you're setting up users in the system, one thing you can assign is who reports to who. So in this case, we have Abby Smith, and as part of Abby's job assignment, we said who her manager is. So if we go in here, we can see, okay, here's her organization. She works for the help desk. She is an analyst, and she reports to Elliot Jones. So Elliot is going to be the manager who gets to see the work that Abby is doing. Now, if you had multiple job assignments, which you can in Totara, so if I had, maybe if she does this part-time, but then does project management part-time as well for another department, she may have another manager for that other work. And so both managers then would have the ability to add things to learning plans and mark things complete. So close that window and go back to the plan itself. So when I'm talking about a manager, that's what I mean. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to go through it, and in this learning plan, the user actually has permission to go and add courses to the plan so that they can request additional items to be assigned to them learning-wise. You don't have to set up your plans this way. I'm going to show you how you're able to set up plans so that you can make it so that the learner can add things to the plan and maybe they can be self-approved basically where they add the course and they're able to go take it. You can set up learning plans such that the user can add things, but they have to send an approval request to their manager. So here we have added an objective, but we've not sent it off to the manager for approval yet. So she wanted to work on her public speaking skills. She hasn't gotten anything started on this yet, so we can send that approval request if we need to. So that now is going to go off to her manager as a request. And then we can also assign programs. So programs, again, this is a series of courses this one might take. And I don't actually have any programs on this particular site, just because it's a sandbox site and I haven't set any up yet. I see a question. Are managers the only ones who can approve requests? Can admins do it as well? So yes, admins can also approve the requests. However, they don't receive a notification that someone has put in a request. Okay. And I should say, administrators are also going to be able to go through and add things to people's learning plans, like add courses and competencies, mark things proficient as well. So that's a really good point that Jeff makes, is that administrators on the site will also have the ability to do those sorts of things, not just the person's staff manager. So that's a learning plan from a learner perspective. So let's take a look. And actually, let me hit the competencies tab because I think I just skipped over it. So competencies, again, those are skills that have been set up in the system. So you get to go and set up lists of skills, and those skills may be linked to the position somebody holds, maybe the organization they work for. Everybody on the help desk needs to know common operating systems. And so that's the expectation we've set for our learners. You need to have this skill. We need to be able to mark your proficiency status in it. And the system comes with a set of, it doesn't come with a set of default competencies. That's something you add to the system as content. But in terms of the status dropdowns, you can decide what they're going to say. So you may have some competencies that are, maybe the person is proficient or not proficient. You may have some competencies where the person is competent, competent with supervision, or not competent. Whatever scale, whatever descriptions you use, you'll be able to set up scales that use that same terminology. So different competencies can have different scales used to rate them. With competencies, we can also have linked coursework. And we're going to do a session on competencies particularly. If you're not familiar with them, there's also a course on them out in the Totara Academy, and I'll point you towards that towards the end of the session. But we can link coursework to it, and we can say it is mandatory that someone completes this course for this competency to be considered complete. Or maybe we have a couple of optional courses that the person can maybe take if they want to. And if they complete it, then the competency is considered complete. And that marking would happen automatically. Otherwise, and I'm going to show you in a minute how our managers can come in and mark proficiencies by hand. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to log out as Abby. And we're going to pop back in now as Abby's manager. Okay, so here's Abby's manager. We can see that there are a few approval requests that have come through. So those are tasks in the system for me to do. We can also see alerts. So Abby created a new objective, and then she sent me that approval request because, if we just allowed her to add her own objectives, we would just get the notification letting us know that she created an objective, and we can go take a look at it, be like, okay, great, you created an objective. We can click, and this link will also be in the email that gets sent. So for these notifications, they also go out via email. We can go in, we can take a look at the things she's asked to be assigned, essentially. We can review those, and we can decide whether we want to approve or decline the request. So in this case, I'm going to approve it. I think it'd be great for her to work on her public speaking skills. If I need to, I can give a reason as well. So if I need to, if she has multiple managers, I might want to provide a reason that I asked her not to do a particular objective or a competency or something like that. Now, the other things I can do, and I'm still looking at Abby's plan, is I can go in, I can see the course she's working on. If I try to launch the course as her manager, I'm only going to be able to see it if I'm also enrolled in it, so just something to keep in mind. I can see her progress. I can see any evidence linked to it. We can also, if we choose to, set up due dates, and we can assign a priority level to the courses and competencies that are set up in the system. Please note that those due dates don't send notifications or anything. It's just informational. And with the priorities, it's just informational to the user. It's not going to force them to work through courses in a certain order or anything like that. If we take a look at competencies, actually, one more thing with courses. If I need to mark a course manually complete for someone, so for example, maybe Abby went and took a CPR course, and I know that it's equivalent to the course that we have in our system, so I want to go ahead and mark her complete for that. I can go into the actions area. I'm going to click on the little thing that looks kind of like a bar graph. And I'm going to give her recognition of prior learning, meaning saw CPR certification valid through 2020. That way, if anybody ever comes back and says, well, why did they get marked complete for this if they didn't actually complete it in the system, that reason travels with that status. So now that course is considered 100% complete. If I want to, I could go and I can assign her additional coursework. I could go and take a look at her competencies. So here are the skills that she's been assigned. I could add additional skills for her as well, though I think she's already been assigned all the ones in the system. So I can come in and mark those levels of proficiency. So maybe for data analysis, maybe she did some work with me. I kind of mentored her through some stuff, and now I know that she is competent with supervision. The next step for her is to then go and do that process by herself, and then I can mark her competent once I kind of review her work at the end. We can see again, may have linked courses to the competencies. In this case, I don't have any. We can link evidence to competencies. So again, if I saw that data analysis from a previous job, or like with instructional design, if I reviewed old courses she had created, then I may use that evidence to say, yep, you're good, you don't need to take this. We can also, again, mark priority. We can have comments where we kind of, have remarks back and forth to each other between the learner and manager. And if I click into actions, I can actually fill in a lot more data about it. So I can fill in if there was an additional assessor. We can actually have assessors set up in the system. So, if we have like known third parties that often come in and do certifications or something like that, or reviews for competencies, we can actually have a list built into the system. Otherwise, I'm the assessor because I'm the one who marked the competency complete. And we can come through and like update the status, set the date. And one thing that's good to know is that we keep track of where somebody worked and what they were doing basically when this was marked complete. So we can always come back and see where they were at that time. But I'm kind of derailing into competencies a little too far, so I'm going to bring myself back. Objectives, again, if I wanted to add an objective for Abby, I could do that by just adding new objective. And again, these are things that will be just in her local learning plan. It's not going to be something that's shared out in the system. So I might say that she needs to work on her, her email tone. I might provide a description of that so that she gets an idea of what I'm looking for her to do. I can set the priority, and then I can set the status. So if she is in progress, like maybe she's been sending me some emails to review, we can add that as an objective. And then finally, we have programs. So if we choose to, we can go and add programs for the person as well. So that's sort of the lay of the land. That's how things look from the learner's perspective, as well as the manager's perspective. One final piece from the manager's perspective is that if I want to go and get access to lots of, all of the people who report to me, I can go to the team tab. And when I see the listing for each user, the plans is one of those items. So I could go like for Carl into his learning plans, create a new plan. If I want to, I can go and add things to it. So I have a couple of different plan templates, and I'll talk about why in a minute. But we can go and add a new plan for him, add a start and completion date, and create the plan. And then we can start dropping things into it. So things like courses and competencies and things like that. So in this case, I have plan creation requiring approval. You don't necessarily have to do that. It's just how one of my default templates was set up. So the next step I'd like to show you, and if you have any questions, please feel free to ping them in, but I'm going to go ahead and move on to what the administrator has to do with this whole process. Let me poke at that question real quick and see. Programs include certifications too. That's a really good question, actually. I believe it does, but we'll double check at the end to make sure. So I'm in as an administrator. Again, this is Totara Learn 12. If you're on a previous version, go under Site Administration, and then you'll see Learning Plans as an option. In my case, though, I'm going to go into the new Site Administrator panel, and then I'm going to go down to Learning Plans. Okay. There is a default plan template that comes with the system. You can set which plan template is going to be the default. So if you have one that you use most of the time, you can set that default for your users. Now, these templates that we're setting up, again, it's a structure and it's kind of like a rule system. It doesn't actually say like, and here are the courses the person needs to take, and here are the competencies. This is a higher level than that. This is just saying who's going to be allowed to do what within a learning plan. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the existing plan template that we've been using. So I'm going to go ahead and edit that. We can see that it's already in use, so we don't want to make a bunch of changes to it necessarily. So with each template, we're going to set, let me click back over. We're going to give it a name, something descriptive, so that when somebody's adding a learning plan, they know which template they're choosing. And then we're going to set an end date. And this is just a default end date. When you actually add the learning plan for the user, you can update that date. I had a question come up in the previous session. What if you don't want to have an end date on your learning plans? Well, unfortunately, you have to. However, if you don't want it to be enforced, just set it way far out into the future. If I set it to like 2025 or something like that, that's fine. I'm going to save changes. And then we're going to look at the components of the learning plan. So what are the sort of learning items that we can assign through this learning plan template? By default, you can do courses, competencies, objectives, and programs. Personally, I tend to turn programs off, and here's the reason why. Learning plans are just one method of learning assignment within the system. You can also assign programs via sort of automated assignment, like if somebody has a certain position and a program is linked to that position, the user is automatically assigned it when they are added to the system, right? Or if they are part of an audience, they may automatically be assigned some courses. So here's the thing. Those things that are assigned outside of the learning plan will not show up in the learning plan unless you add them. So for example, if I had an onboarding program that's automatically added for users just by, because they became a user of the system, that's not going to be added to their learning plan. So they'll have this program that's outside of the plan. And my concern is that a user might get confused by that. So I often turn programs off when I'm creating learning plans, but that's just the way that I usually roll with it. That's what's worked for the business rules that I've dealt with. Then we get into the workflow. So the workflow, again, is about what people can do within the plan. So in this case, my learning plan is using what's called the basic workflow. So there's some like preset rule sets that you can use. So this is the basic one, where it's the learning plan we already saw. So the learner can add things, the manager can approve them. There's also the user-driven one, where the learner really does have control over what goes into their plan, which can be totally fine. If we want learners to have that ability to, because the courses that like the learner can assign themselves, it's a limited set. So there may be 3,000 courses on the system, but we may only have 500 that are available to them based on the audiences they're a part of and things like that. So there are ways to prevent someone from being able to get into stuff that they shouldn't, essentially. I've also seen people do things like if they want users to be able to assign courses to themselves through learning plans, but nothing else, no competencies or anything, that's great. Just turn those components off. In my case, though, I'm going to actually change this to be the custom workflow so that we get in and you can see all of the nitty-gritty features that come as part of the learning plan setup. The first thing we decide is how is the plan considered complete? Because hopefully there's sort of an end goal with this learning plan. Now, it can be someone checking a box, basically, to say, yes, this person has completed this plan. Or it can be done automatically. So when all of the components within the plan, all of the learning items assigned through the plan, so all the courses and competencies, etc., then the plan can be automatically marked complete by the system. Or and this can be an and as well, the system can say when the plan completion date passes, then we automatically mark that learning plan complete. Again, comes down to your business workflow. Some people do a new learning plan every year. Some people do a single learning plan that all of the personal learning gets added to over time. Some people have multiple plans, so they may have one with certain rules that allow learners to add things. They may have another one that's more of sort of like the official pathway that they use for their position, or if they're in transition to another position in the company, they might set up a special learning plan for that. So you get to decide how you want to use this tool within the realm of your learning. So then we go through with plan permissions. Who can view a plan, see that it exists, get into it? Who can create one? Can the learner create a plan for themselves? Can the manager create a plan for their learners? Who can update it? So this update actually just refers to the name of the plan and the date, the end date. who can delete the plan, who can approve it. So meaning that in this case, the learner can request it and then the manager can approve it. And then who can mark it complete or reactivate it. So in this case, I don't allow my learners to mark their own plan complete, but I do allow their manager to. One thing to keep in mind too, when you're creating a learning plan, when you're marking a learning plan complete, it does not mark everything within the plan complete. Like it's not going to go through and like check off all the courses as complete. We're just saying the overall plan is complete. So there may be courses that are unfinished or competencies that are unfinished, but if that makes sense in your workflow, that's totally fine. You know, especially if you're doing the deal where every year you create a new learning plan for your users. You know, they may have coursework from one year that carries on to another year. Then we get into the components and we say, okay, with courses, do we want to have due dates? Do we want to have priorities? Now, when it says required here, what it means is it required for this field to be filled in when the course is added to the plan? Do we have to enter a due date? Do we have to set a priority level? The priority scale by default is low, medium, high. You can create new scales if you need to. And down below, we say, okay, when somebody wants to add a new course, who can add one? And in this case, we could just allow the user to add one, means they could add it to their plan and go start taking it. We can allow learners to deny the addition of courses, which I've actually never seen in use before, I don't think. We can have learners request, so this is the most common one. And then we also have that approval status. So I think the most common thing I see is learner requests something, manager approves it. Do we allow people to set the priority, the due date, the completion status? So again, I don't allow my learners to mark their courses complete. I have also seen businesses that don't allow managers to mark courses complete if there's automated course completion rules, because they don't want someone to mark someone complete for something just because they want to check off a box, and move them through their training. Like we want to make sure they actually completed it. And then who can delete mandatory items? So this refers to when I am adding competencies with linked coursework, are people allowed to delete those courses deemed mandatory for competency completion? I'm going to save changes. And it's going to look kind of similar for competencies. We're going to say, do we allow due dates to be set? Again, I'll make it optional. Do we want to set priorities? Note, due dates do not send notifications or anything like that. It's just informational on the screen for the user. Same with priorities. One cool thing with competencies are the only things that can be automatically dropped into a learning plan when it's created. Typically, a learning plan, the structure is created, but it's empty. You have to go as a manager or a learner or an administrator and add things to that plan for each user. However, if there are competencies assigned to a position, if there are competencies linked to an organization, if they have linked coursework, and you include all those pieces, then those will automatically be added to the learning plan when the plan is created for the user. Otherwise, plan is created empty. We can also include completed competencies. These may be competencies that they've been assigned before, have already gotten done, and it's up to you to decide if you want to see those in the plan or if you'd rather have those hidden so that the learner is not seeing the same things over and over. We're always going to see completed competencies like in the record of learning. When competencies come in, we can also have them assigned to their default status, meaning typically it's not yet assigned, or excuse me, not yet started. I know we're at the end of our time. I'm just going to rattle on for like 1 or 2 more minutes, and then we'll be done. So final things. With competencies, we go through and set permissions, who can add them, who can set priorities and due dates, who can set the status, who can delete mandatory ones. Again, the link to position and organization can be mandatory for a competency, so it's up to you to decide on that. So we go through, and the process is, let me pop it back up again, that the administrators need to go and create their learning plan template. They may be able to assign a template to an audience if they choose to, meaning that the 300 users in this audience should all get a learning plan created based on a particular template. When the learning plans are created for those users automatically, they will not have any content in them unless there are competencies linked in. Managers and learners create the plan, add the learning items, mark completion. They'll receive notifications and requests like we saw, and then they can mark the learning plan complete as needed. Some follow-up resources for you. Toter.community, we have academy courses that cover hierarchies, that will cover competencies. There's also one specifically on learning plans, so it's definitely a good one to work through because there are like system simulations and resources and best practices and things like that included. Toter.help, documentation site. Toterlearning.com, just our general website. It's been revamped and it's very pretty. And demo.toterlearning.com. Sandbox site. It's currently on version 11. It's going to be updated to version 12 very soon. So it's a good place to go play. Coming up tomorrow, because of my love of appraisals, we're doing an appraisals Q&A, talking about performance management tools within ToterLearn. So feel free to join us for that. There's registration links on the community site. We also have user conferences coming up. So in APAC, it's coming up in Melbourne, March 18th and 19th. EMEA coming up in London in May. And then we also have one coming up in New Zealand, which I believe is in August. I just still need to get my slide added for it. So thank you all for listening. Please feel free to get in touch either via email or on the Toter.community site or via Twitter. And there's just one question I'm going to pick up here. Can a user self-enroll in a program in any other way besides a learning plan? Unfortunately, they cannot. Programs are sort of highly controlled, and it's assumed that programs are going to be a top-down assignment, meaning that an administrator is going to assign it or something like that. Yeah, that's a good question there. I'm just going to check the chat, see if there's any other questions. Does programs include certifications too? Anna, I will drop you an email back with the answer to that question. Thank you all for your time and attention. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll talk to you soon.